Hello, my name is Declan Hargrove, but everyone calls me Dex. I'm 60 years old and, well, until recently, I was what you might call an inveterate skeptic. You know, that type of person who only believes in what they can see, touch, and measure. Well, that was me. I spent most of my life working as an electrical engineer here in Boise, Idaho. It's a quiet city, perfect for someone like me who has always valued predictability and routine. My life was quite simple. Wake up, go to work, come home, have dinner, sleep and repeat everything the next day. On the weekends, I took care of the garden and did small repairs around the house. Nothing extraordinary, but that's exactly how I liked it. As for religion or spirituality, well, I saw them as crutches for people who couldn't deal with reality. I never understood the need to believe in something bigger or in an afterlife. For me, when we died, it would be the end of the line. Full stop. No more or less. I prided myself on my logical and rational view of the world. I thought I had all the answers, or at least that all the important answers could be found through science and reason. Looking back now, I realize how arrogant and closed to other possibilities I was. But all that changed on a seemingly ordinary Saturday. It was the day my life, and my worldview, turned upside down. The day I had a near-death experience. I was in the backyard, mowing the grass like I did every Saturday morning. The sky was clear, the sun was shining, and I was completely absorbed in my routine task. There was nothing special about that day, nothing that could prepare me for what was about to happen. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. At first, I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just tiredness or maybe indigestion, but the pain only grew, spreading through my body like an out-of-control fire. Before I could process what was happening, my vision went black and I fell to the ground. At that moment, I thought I was dying. And, in a way, I think I was. But what happened next was something I could never have imagined or predicted. It was the beginning of a journey that would completely change my understanding of life, death, and everything in between. And that's the story I want to share with you now. The story of how a hardened skeptic like me had his worldview completely transformed by an experience that defies all logic and reason. An experience that showed me that there is much more to this universe than our eyes can see or our mind can comprehend. When darkness took over, I thought it was the end. After all, I always believed that death was simply that. Darkness, emptiness, the end of everything. But I was wrong. Very wrong. Suddenly the darkness lifted and I found myself in a place that defies description. It was as if I had been transported to a realm of indescribable colors. Colors I didn't even know existed. Imagine a rainbow, but with thousands of shades that our human eyes have never seen before. The space around me seemed to vibrate with an energy of its own, as if every particle was alive and singing a silent melody. The feeling was surreal. I no longer felt my physical body. There was no pain, no heaviness, no sensation of standing or lying down. It was as if I were pure consciousness, floating in this ocean of colors and light. And the strangest of all, I didn't feel afraid. On the contrary, a deep sense of peace and tranquility enveloped me. I looked around me, trying to understand where I was. There were no recognizable structures, no ground or sky as we know it. It was an infinite space, but somehow it wasn't empty. Each place in this space seemed to have its own personality, its own vibe. As I tried to process all of this, I noticed something on what could be called the horizon. Although that term doesn't really do justice to what I saw. It was a light, brighter and purer than anything I had ever seen before. But it wasn't a blinding or uncomfortable light. It was warm, welcoming, as if it were calling me. I felt an irresistible attraction to this light. It wasn't a physical force pulling me, but an internal desire, as if every fiber of my being knew this was where I should go. I started moving towards her. I wasn't walking or flying. It was more like my thought and desire were enough to get me there. As I got closer, the feeling of love and acceptance grew stronger. It was like I was coming home after a long trip, even though I had never been there before. The light began to take shape, and to my surprise, I saw a figure emerging from it. At that moment, I had a revelation that shook everything I believed. The figure I saw was Jesus, not the Jesus of paintings or films, but a presence so real and alive that he made all the representations I had ever seen seem like pale imitations. What struck me most was the expression on his face. There was no judgment, no disappointment at my lifelong skepticism. His eyes conveyed such deep, unconditional love that I felt completely exposed and, at the same time, completely accepted. I stood there, in front of this divine presence, speechless. How could I, a man who spent his entire life denying the existence of such a thing, express what I was feeling? Before I could form any coherent thoughts, Jesus spoke. His voice was not audible in the traditional sense, but I felt it in every part of my being. "What have you learned in life, Declan?" he asked. The question took me by surprise. What had I learned? All my life, I was proud of my technical knowledge, my logic, my rational understanding of the world. But at that moment, in front of that divine presence, I realized how insignificant it all seemed. I remained silent, unable to respond. And it was then that the scene around me began to shift again, taking me on a journey through my own life, a journey that would forever change my understanding of what truly matters. In the blink of an eye, the scenery around me transformed. I was no longer in front of Jesus, but I found myself immersed in scenes from my own life. It was like watching a movie, only I wasn't just a spectator. I could feel all the emotions, both mine and those of the people around me. The first scene I saw transported me back to the schoolyard when I was about 12 years old. There I was, laughing with my friends as we made fun of Michael Foster, a poorer boy than most of us. I remember how funny we thought he wore worn-out clothes and old shoes. At the time, it seemed like just a harmless game between boys. But now, seeing the scene through God's eyes, I could feel the deep pain our words caused Michael. I saw how every laugh, every nasty comment, stuck into his heart like a knife. I could feel her shame, her sense of not belonging, the desperate desire to just disappear. What was most shocking was realizing how that seemingly insignificant moment had a lasting impact on Michael's life. I saw flashes of your future, your struggle with self-esteem, difficult relationships, missed opportunities, all of it, in part, because of those cruel words we said when we were children. I wanted to scream at my younger self, to tell him to stop, to understand the damage he was causing. But, of course, he couldn't change the past. All he could do was feel the crushing weight of regret and shame. But the review didn't stop there. I saw other moments in my life, moments when I was selfish, when I hurt people without even realizing it. I saw the times I ignored someone in need of help because I was too busy with my own problems. Each scene was a painful lesson in how my actions, or lack thereof, affected others. However, not everything was negative. To my surprise, I also saw moments of kindness that I had completely forgotten about. Once, when I was young, I helped an elderly woman cross the street during a storm. I barely remembered it, but now I could see how that simple act of kindness brightened her day, giving her hope in humanity. I saw the day I comforted a coworker who was going through a difficult divorce. At the time, I felt like I hadn't done much. I just listened and offered some words of support. But now, I could see how crucial that moment of empathy was for him, helping him find the strength to move forward. Every scene, every moment, carried a profound lesson. I realized that our actions, no matter how small they may seem, have a much greater impact than we imagine. A kind word can change someone's day. One act of cruelty can leave scars that last a lifetime. The most surprising thing was realizing that I was not being judged for these actions. There was no condemnation, just a deep and compassionate understanding. It was as if the universe itself was showing me the true meaning of every moment of my life, giving me the chance to truly understand and learn. As the scenes from my life continued to unfold, I began to notice a pattern, The moments that really mattered, the ones that seemed to shine with a brighter light, were the ones in which I had acted with love, compassion, and empathy. It wasn't the professional achievements, nor the material goods that I had accumulated. It was the human connection, the shared love, that really made the difference. This revelation hit me like a wave. All my life, I had focused on the wrong things. I sought success, stability, logic. And while these things weren't inherently bad, I realized that I had neglected what really mattered: love and compassion for others. As my life review drew to a close, I felt overwhelmed. It was as if I had lived an entire existence in a matter of moments, absorbing lessons that would take several lifetimes to learn. It was at that moment that Jesus reappeared, his presence bringing a sense of calm and clarity amidst the whirlwind of emotions I was experiencing. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, I felt a wave of understanding wash over me, as if his own reflections were being transmitted directly into my consciousness. The message was clear and profound. Love is the essence of everything. It wasn't the kind of romantic love we see in movies, nor even the familial love we're used to. It was something much broader and deeper. A universal, unconditional love that encompasses all existence. I realized that this love was the driving force behind the entire universe, the energy that connects all things. Jesus showed me that every act of kindness, every gesture of compassion, every moment of empathy we had seen during my life review was an expression of this universal love. And every act of cruelty or indifference was a moment when I had disconnected from that source of love. I understood that it wasn't about following rigid rules or religious dogmas. True spirituality, true connection with the divine, was in the daily practice of this universal love. It was about seeing the humanity in every person, treating every being with dignity and respect, regardless of who they were or what they had done. As I absorbed this lesson, a new vision formed before me. I saw a diverse group of souls. Some I recognized as Christian, others Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, and even some who seemed to have no particular religious affiliation. They all coexisted in harmony in this spiritual realm. This shocked me. As a man who grew up in a predominantly Christian society, I always assumed that if there was a heaven, it would be exclusive to followers of Jesus. Seeing this diversity left me confused and intrigued. As if reading my thoughts, Jesus conveyed another message. It is not religion that defines the destiny of the soul, but character and actions. At that moment, I understood that spiritual judgment was not based on following a specific faith or performing certain rituals. What really mattered was how we lived our lives, our ability to love, forgive, and treat others with compassion. I saw that many of the souls I observed had lived lives dedicated to service to others, kindness, and love, regardless of their religious beliefs. Some had been great spiritual leaders. Others were ordinary people who simply lived with love and integrity. This revelation was both liberating and challenging. Liberating because it showed that divine love was much more inclusive and all-encompassing than I had ever imagined. Challenging because it meant we couldn't hide behind religious labels or empty rituals. What really mattered were our actions, our ability to love, and our willingness to grow and evolve spiritually. I realized that I had spent much of my life judging the beliefs of others, dismissing spirituality as an illusion. Now, he saw that true spirituality transcended religious boundaries and manifested itself in practical love, compassion, and the search for truth. Jesus showed me that every person, regardless of their faith or lack thereof, had the potential to connect with this universal source of love. It wasn't about having the right answers or following a specific set of rules. It was about opening your heart, cultivating empathy, and living with authenticity and compassion. As I absorbed these lessons, I felt a profound transformation occurring within me. My skepticism and intellectual arrogance began to melt, giving way to a new form of understanding. I realized that there was much more to the universe than my logical mind could comprehend, and that the path to true wisdom lay in the heart, not just the mind. As I began to assimilate these profound revelations about universal love and the true nature of spirituality, I felt a sudden shift. The bright light and vibrant colors began to dissipate, and a feeling of heaviness returned to my body. It was as if I was being pulled back into physical reality, leaving that spiritual realm behind. Suddenly, I opened my eyes and found myself lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by doctors and nurses. The fluorescent overhead light was blinding, and the sound of beeping machines filled my ears. The pain in my chest returned, brutally reminding me of the heart attack I had suffered. "Welcome back, Mr. Hargrove," one of the doctors said, his voice mixed with relief and concern. "You gave us quite a scare. Your heart stopped for a few minutes." I wanted to tell them about what I had experienced, about the indescribable colors, about Jesus, about the lessons I had learned. But the words stuck in my throat. How could I explain something so profound and transcendental using our limited language? The following days in the hospital were a constant challenge. Physically, I was struggling to recover from the heart attack. Doctors talked about lifestyle changes, new medications, and the need to reduce stress. But while they focused on my body, my mind and spirit were in turmoil, trying to process everything I had experienced. At night, lying alone in the hospital room, I relived every moment of my near-death experience. The memories were so vivid, so real, that sometimes I wondered if I was dreaming again. But the emotional impact, the deep sense of peace and love I had felt, was undeniable. When I was finally discharged and returned home, I faced a new challenge. How do I integrate this transformative experience into my everyday life? My routine, which once brought me so much comfort, now seemed empty and meaningless. How could I go back to mowing the lawn on Saturdays or worrying about work reports when I had experienced something so profound? My wife, Sarah, noticed the change immediately. "Dex, you look different," she commented one day, her voice mixed with concern and curiosity. "What happened to you in that hospital?" I tried to explain, but the words seemed inadequate. How could I describe the colors I saw, which don't even exist in our world? How could I convey the feeling of unconditional love I experienced? Sarah listened patiently, but I saw in her eyes that she couldn't fully understand. I didn't blame her. I was still struggling to understand myself. In the days and weeks that followed, I found myself questioning much of what I had previously considered absolute certainties: my materialistic view of the world, my skepticism of anything spiritual. All of this was being challenged. I found myself looking at people differently, seeing in them the potential for the love and kindness that Jesus had shown me. But not everything was easy. There were moments when frustration took over. I wanted to be a better, more compassionate, more loving person. But old habits are hard to break. Sometimes I caught myself being impatient with a supermarket cashier or ignoring a beggar on the street. In those moments, guilt consumed me. I had experienced something so profound, so transformative. Why was it so hard to live up to it? One night, sitting in my home office, looking at a photo from when I was younger, I had an epiphany. The transformation I sought would not happen overnight. Just as it took me a lifetime to become the skeptic I was, it would take time to fully incorporate the lessons I learned from my near-death experience. I realized that the important thing was not perfection, but the continuous effort to be better, to love more, to be more compassionate. Every little act of kindness, every moment of empathy, was a step in the right direction. With this understanding, I began to approach my journey in a new way. It wasn't about dramatic, instantaneous change, but about constant, gradual growth. And with this new perspective, I felt like I was truly beginning to honor the extraordinary experience I had and the lessons I learned. With my new understanding of the importance of love and compassion, I began to look at my past with new eyes. I remembered Michael Foster, the boy my friends and I had ridiculed in school. The guilt I felt during my near-death experience resurfaced with a vengeance. I realized I couldn't move forward without trying to right this past mistake. After a few days of gathering my courage, I decided to look for Michael. It wasn't easy. It had been almost 5 decades since our school days. I used the internet, social media, and even hired a private investigator. Finally, after weeks of searching, I managed to locate him. Michael now lived in Portland, Oregon. I worked as a social worker, helping young people at risk. When I read about your career, I felt a mixture of admiration and shame. Despite what he suffered, he had chosen to dedicate his life to helping others. With my heart in my hand, I called him. When Michael answered, my voice shook. "Hello, Michael. This is Declan Hargrove. I don't know if you remember me, but we went to school together in Boise." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, in a controlled voice, Michael replied, "Yes, Dex. I remember you." I swallowed hard and continued, "Michael, I'm calling to apologize for the way I treated you at school, for the cruel things I said. I know it's been a long time, but I need you to know how sorry I am." Another silence followed, this time longer. When Michael spoke again, his voice was choked with emotion. "Dex, I'm not going to lie. What you and your friends did hurt me deeply. I spent years fighting the low self-esteem it caused me." His words were like stabs in my heart. But he continued, "However, over time, I learned to forgive, not for you, but for myself. And honestly, I never expected to receive an apology. The fact that you're doing this now, well, it means very." We talked for almost 2 hours that night. Michael told me about his life, the challenges he faced, and how he finally found his calling helping other young people who were going through similar difficulties to the ones he faced. I talked about my near-death experience and how it had changed my perspective on life. At the end of the conversation, Michael said something I'll never forget. "Dex, the fact that you sought this moment of redemption shows that people can change. It gives me hope for the young people I work with." In the months that followed, Michael and I stayed in touch. We developed an unlikely friendship based on mutual respect and a shared desire to make a difference in the world. He even invited me to speak at one of the youth programs he ran, where I shared my story and the lessons I learned. This experience of seeking Michael's forgiveness was profoundly transformative. It made me realize that it's never too late to try to right the wrongs of the past. It also showed me the power of forgiveness, both in giving and receiving. Inspired by this experience, I began looking for other opportunities for redemption in my life. I got in touch with old coworkers I'd had disagreements with. I reconciled with a distant cousin after years of estrangement due to a family feud. Every act of seeking forgiveness, every attempt to right past wrongs, was like removing a weight from my soul. It wasn't easy. Facing one's past never is. But each time I did, I felt like I was honoring the lessons I learned during my near-death experience. I realized that redemption wasn't just about righting specific wrongs, but about a fundamental shift in the way I related to others and the world around me. It was about cultivating empathy, about trying to see the world through other people's eyes before judging. This journey of seeking redemption also taught me about the importance of vulnerability. By opening up, admitting my mistakes, and asking for forgiveness, I was creating space for deeper, more authentic connections with the people around me. Of course, not all of my attempts at redemption were successful. There were people who weren't ready or willing to forgive, and I had to learn to respect that too. But even in these cases, the act of trying, of reaching out in a gesture of reconciliation, seemed important in its own right. As I continued on this journey of self-discovery and personal growth, I began to understand that redemption was not a final destination, but an ongoing process. It was about choosing every day to be a better person, more compassionate and more aware of the impact of my actions on others. And so, day after day, conversation after conversation, I continued my journey of transformation, seeking to live in a way that honored the profound lessons I learned during my near-death experience. As time passed, my near-death experience began to influence not only the grand gestures of redemption, but also the small moments of my daily life. I realized that the real transformation wasn't just in the big actions, but in the way I approached every interaction, every decision, no matter how small. My daily routine, which once seemed so monotonous and predictable, took on new meaning. Waking up in the morning was no longer just the start of another day of work, but an opportunity to make a difference, no matter how small. I started waking up earlier, not to get ahead of work, but to have time to meditate and mentally prepare myself for the day. On my way to work, instead of isolating myself with my headphones like I used to, I started paying more attention to the people around me. I smiled at strangers on the subway, offered my seat to anyone who needed it, sometimes even started small conversations. It was surprising how these small gestures could brighten not only other people's days, but mine as well. At the office, my attitude changed drastically. Before, I was known for being efficient, but also cold and distant. Now, I made a conscious effort to be more present and attentive to my colleagues. He asked about their lives, offered help when he saw someone overwhelmed, and tried to be a more attentive listener during meetings. One day, a younger colleague, Samantha, came to me with tears in her eyes. She was going through a difficult divorce and was having trouble focusing on work. In the past, I probably would have felt uncomfortable and tried to end the conversation as quickly as possible. But this time, I offered her my time and my understanding. I shared a little about my own journey, about how I learned the importance of compassion. I didn't solve her problems, but I could see that the simple act of listening and showing empathy made a huge difference for her. At home, my relationship with Sarah also evolved. I started to value our time together more, to really listen when she spoke, instead of just waiting for my turn to speak. We started to have deeper conversations about life, about spirituality, about what really mattered to us. Although she still didn't fully understand my near-death experience, Sarah appreciated the positive change she saw in me. On the weekends, instead of just focusing on household chores, I started looking for ways to give back to the community. I volunteered at a local shelter, helping to serve meals to homeless people. Every face I saw there reminded me of the lesson I learned about seeing the humanity in each person. My relationship with nature has also changed. What was once just the backyard that I maintained out of obligation became a space for connection and reflection. I began to take care of the garden with more attention and love, marveling at the miracle of growth and life that I had previously taken for granted. Even my diet and health habits have undergone a transformation. It was no longer just about living longer or looking better. It was about respecting the gift of life I was given, about treating my body like the sacred vehicle that it is. I started eating more consciously, exercising not out of obligation, but as a way of celebrating life and the health I have. Of course, not every day was easy. There were times when I found myself falling into old habits, being impatient or selfish. But the difference now was that I recognized those moments, reflected on them, and strived to do better next time. One of the most significant changes was in relation to time. Before, I was always in a hurry, always thinking about the next task, the next objective. Now, I made an effort to live more in the present, to truly appreciate each moment. I began to notice things that previously went unnoticed. A stranger's smile, the song of a bird, the texture of a hot cup of coffee in my hands. As these small changes accumulated, I began to feel a deep sense of peace and purpose. It wasn't that my life had become perfect or free of problems, but now I had a new perspective, a deeper understanding of what really mattered. I realized that true transformation was not in grand heroic gestures or dramatic changes, but in these small daily choices. It was about choosing love over indifference, compassion over judgment, gratitude over dissatisfaction. And with each choice and each small act of kindness, I felt like I was a little closer to honoring that extraordinary experience that changed my life. Despite the positive changes in my life, not everything was a bed of roses. As time passed, I began to face new challenges and doubts that tested my faith and my new worldview. One of the biggest challenges came when my old skepticism began to resurface. There were days when I would wake up and wonder if everything I experienced during my near-death was just a hallucination caused by the lack of oxygen in my brain. The logical, rational part of my being, which had dominated my life for so long, struggled to accept the reality of what I had experienced. One particularly difficult morning, I shared these doubts with Sarah. She looked at me with a mixture of concern and understanding before saying, "Dex, I don't know if what you saw was real in the traditional sense of the word, but what I do know is that the change in you is real. The love and compassion that you have demonstrated are real. Maybe that's what really matters. Your words touched me deeply and made me reflect. I realized that regardless of the objective reality of my experience, the impact it had on my life and the lives of those around me was undeniable. I decided that instead of obsessing over proving or disproving what happened, I should focus on living up to the lessons I learned. Another challenge arose at work. My new, more compassionate, less competitive approach was not always well received in the aggressive corporate environment in which I worked. Some colleagues interpreted my change as weakness, others as a strange strategy to climb the career ladder. One day, my boss called me into his office. "Dex," he said, "I've noticed you've been acting different lately. Your work continues to be excellent, but I'm worried that you might be losing focus. Remember, it's a jungle here. We can't afford to have being very sensitive." I was silent for a moment, thinking about how to respond. Finally, I looked him in the eye and said, "I understand your concern, but I believe I can be compassionate and efficient at the same time. In fact, I believe that caring for others and creating a more positive work environment can make us even more productive." My boss didn't seem completely convinced, but decided to give me the benefit of the doubt. Over the next few months, I strived to show that compassion and business success were not mutually exclusive. It was a challenge, but little by little, I started to see positive changes in the team dynamics. Perhaps the hardest challenge came when I tried to share my experience with others. Some friends and family reacted with skepticism, others with concern about my mental health. There were even those who suggested that I had found religion and was trying to convert others. These reactions hurt me and sometimes made me question whether I should keep my experience a secret. But then I would remember the unconditional love I felt during my near-death experience, and it gave me the strength to carry on. I learned to share my story more thoughtfully, focusing less on the supernatural details and more on the lessons I learned about love, compassion, and the true meaning of life. I realized that I didn't need to convince anyone of the reality of my experience. The important thing was to live in a way that reflected the truths I discovered. There were times when the longing for that feeling of absolute peace and love I experienced was almost unbearable. Everyday life, with its frustrations and challenges, sometimes seemed pale in comparison. In those moments, I longed for that divine connection I felt. But over time, I learned to find echoes of that experience in my daily life. In the smile of a stranger, in the hug of a friend, in the beauty of a sunset. I began to see these moments as reminders of the divine love that permeates all existence. The doubts and challenges have not completely disappeared. There were still days when I struggled to reconcile my spiritual experience with the material world around me. But increasingly, I saw these challenges not as obstacles but as opportunities for growth. I realized that true strength was not in never doubting, but in continuing to choose love and compassion even in the face of doubt. And with each challenge overcome, each doubt faced, I felt my understanding and faith deepen. So, day after day, I continued my journey. Not as someone who had all the answers, but as an eternal learner, always seeking to better understand the mystery of life and love that I had glimpsed in that extraordinary experience. As time went on, the changes in my life began to have a greater and greater impact not only on me, but also on the people around me and the community in which I lived. My relationship with Sarah has blossomed in ways I never could have imagined. At first, she was a little skeptical about my experience, but over time, she began to appreciate the positive changes she saw in me. Our conversations became deeper and more meaningful. We began exploring spiritual and philosophical issues together, something we had never done before in our 35 years of marriage. One day, Sarah surprised me by saying, "You know, Dex, your experience didn't just change you, it changed us both. I feel like we're rediscovering each other after all these years." This moment of connection moved me deeply and made me realize how much our relationship had strengthened. My relationship with my adult children, Brian and Emily, has also undergone a transformation. In the past, I have always been a loving but somewhat distant father, too focused on providing financially and not enough on being emotionally present. Now, I made a point of showing my love not just with words but with actions. I started calling them regularly, not just to ask about work or finances, but to really hear about their lives, their dreams and concerns. Emily, who had always been more sensitive, noticed the change immediately. "Dad, it's like you're finally really seeing us," she said in one of our conversations. Brian, on the other hand, took longer to open up. He was always more like me in his skepticism and career focus, but over time, even he began to appreciate our new dynamic. During one visit, he confided in me that he was going through a difficult time at work. In the past, I probably would have offered practical advice on how to advance your career. This time, I just listened, offered emotional support, and shared my own journey of discovering what really matters in life. In the community, my involvement has grown significantly. In addition to volunteering at the local shelter, I began to get involved in other community projects. I participated in a mentoring program for at-risk youth, using my own story of transformation to inspire them to make positive choices. One of these young people, a boy named Alex, reminded me a lot of Michael Foster, the classmate I had bullied at school. Alex came from a dysfunctional family and was having problems at school. During our mentoring sessions, I shared with him not only practical advice, but also the lessons I learned about compassion and forgiveness. Months later, I received a call from Alex's mother. Her voice breaking, she thanked me. "Mr. Hargrove, I don't know what you said to my son, but he's changed. He's trying harder at school and has even started helping around the house. Thank you for not giving up on him." This moment made me realize the power we have to positively impact the lives of others. Every act of kindness, every word of encouragement, can create ripples of change that spread far beyond what we can see. At work, my new approach began to influence the company culture. Gradually, other colleagues began to adopt a more collaborative and less competitive attitude. One day during a team meeting, a younger colleague said, "Since Dec started promoting this idea of compassion at work, I feel like our environment has become much more positive and productive." These changes did not go unnoticed by the company's management. To my surprise, I was asked to lead a new employee well-being and personal development program. It was an opportunity to bring the lessons I learned to a wider audience. As I became more involved in the community and shared my story, I began to receive invitations to speak at local events. At first, I was hesitant. After all, I never considered myself a public speaker, but I remembered the importance of sharing the lessons I learned. In one of these talks, at a local community center, I shared my journey of transformation. I spoke about the importance of love, compassion, and seeing the humanity in each person. After the talk, an elderly woman approached me with tears in her eyes. "Your story gave me hope," she said. "I thought it was too late to change, but now I see that it's never too late to choose love." These moments of connection and impact made me feel deeply grateful. I realized that my near-death experience wasn't just about my personal transformation, but about how I could use that transformation to make a positive difference in the world around me. Of course, not everything was perfect. There were still challenges, moments of doubt and difficult days. But each time I saw the positive impact my actions had on others, I felt renewed and motivated to continue on this journey of love and compassion. As time went on, I began to see my community not just as a place where I lived, but as an interconnected web of relationships and possibilities. Every interaction, every gesture of kindness, was an opportunity to strengthen that web, to create a world that was a little more loving and compassionate. And so, day after day, I continued my journey, no longer as a man isolated in his own logic and skepticism, but as part of something greater, connected to everyone around me by the transformative power of the love I experienced in that extraordinary near-death experience. It's been 5 years since that fateful Saturday when my life changed forever. 5 years since I experienced something that challenged everything I believed I knew about life, death, and the universe. Looking back, I realize how much I have changed and grown since then. Today, at 65 years old, I feel more alive and fulfilled than I have ever been. Not because my life is perfect or problem-free, but because I have learned to see beauty and meaning in even the most challenging moments. Each day is a new opportunity to put into practice the lessons I learned during my near-death experience. One of the biggest lessons I take with me is the understanding that love is truly the most powerful force in the universe. Not the romantic or sentimental love we see in movies, but a universal, unconditional love that transcends our limited human understanding. It is a love that does not judge, that accepts each being exactly as they are, recognizing the divinity inherent in each of us. I learned that this love is not something abstract or distant, but a force that we can choose to incorporate into our daily lives. It's in the small acts of kindness, in the patience we show to a stranger, in the compassion we offer to someone who is suffering. Each time we choose love over fear, compassion over judgment, we are aligning our lives with this universal force. Another crucial lesson was the understanding that our actions have a much greater impact than we imagine. During my life review, I saw how even the smallest gestures can have profound repercussions. A smile, a kind word, an act of generosity. All of these things create waves of positivity that spread far beyond our immediate knowledge. This awareness made me much more attentive to my actions and words. Now, I try to approach every interaction, no matter how mundane it may seem, as an opportunity to spread love and kindness. I'm not perfect at this, of course, but conscious effort makes a big difference. I also learned about the importance of connection, not just with other people, but with all life, with the planet, with the universe itself. My experience has shown me that we are all part of something much larger, interconnected in ways beyond our understanding. This awareness brought a deep sense of responsibility. Every choice we make, every action we take, affects not just ourselves, but the entire fabric of existence. One of the most challenging but also most freeing lessons was learning to live with mystery. Before, I needed to have answers for everything. My skepticism was a form of control, a way to feel safe in an unpredictable world. Now, I've learned to embrace the unknown, to find comfort in uncertainty. There is so much more to the universe than our limited minds can comprehend, and there is a profound beauty in accepting this. I also learned about forgiveness, not just forgiving others, but forgiving myself. I saw how resentment and guilt can trap us, preventing us from living fully. Forgiveness, I learned, is not about forgetting or excusing hurtful actions, but about releasing yourself from the emotional weight of those experiences. It is an act of self-love as much as it is an act of compassion for others. One of the most profound revelations was understanding that spirituality is not about following a specific set of rules or dogmas, but about living with love, compassion, and integrity. I saw souls of different faiths coexisting in harmony in the spiritual realm, which made me realize that what really matters is not the religious label we carry, but how we live our lives. This understanding has made me much more open and respectful of different beliefs and perspectives. I now see the beauty in the diversity of spiritual paths, recognizing that they all, at their core, seek to connect with something greater than ourselves. Perhaps the most important lesson I learned is about the purpose of life. It's not about accumulating wealth, achieving status, or even seeking personal happiness. The true purpose, I discovered, is to grow in love and awareness, and to help others do the same. It's about evolving spiritually, expanding our capacity to love and understand, and using our unique experiences to contribute positively to the world. Reflecting on my journey, I realized that my near-death experience was not the end of something, but the beginning of a new phase of my life. It was an awakening, a call to live in a more conscious and loving way. I am not a guru or a saint. I still make mistakes. I still have moments of doubt and weakness, but the difference is that now I see every challenge as an opportunity for growth, every interaction as a chance to spread more love in the world. If there is one message I would like to share with the world based on my experience, it would be this: love is real, it is powerful, and it is within reach of all of us. We don't need to have a near-death experience to access it. It is present in every act of kindness, in every moment of compassion, in every choice to see the humanity in others. My experience changed my life in ways I never could have imagined. But the real transformation didn't happen in the moment of the experience itself, but in the choices I made every day since then. And that's a choice we can all make, every moment. The choice to live with more love, more compassion, more awareness. As I share this story, my hope is that it might touch something inside you, the reader. May it inspire you to look at your own life with new eyes, to see the potential for love and connection that exists in every moment. Because in the end, that's what really matters. That's what makes life worth living. And so, I continue my journey, grateful for each day, each challenge, each opportunity to love and grow. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I will face whatever comes with an open heart, full of love and gratitude for the incredible adventure that is life.